So hey, Krysta, how's it going?
Hey Andrew, how's it going? Where
It's
where
good.
are you right now?
I'm in LA right now. I'm in my apartment in Los Angeles. What about yourself?
I'm in Cabo, New
Oh,
Mexico.
San Lucas.
Yes,
How
same
is it?
time zone.
There you go. There you go. That works. Is
Yeah,
it hot?
it is hot. It is really hot.
It's hot here too. It's like it's not as hot as it gets everywhere else sometimes, but it's definitely in the 90s today. So we'll
Yeah,
see.
I had I was just in New Mexico last week, and I think it was hotter there. Although cooler at night, but way hotter during the day. I also had never been to New Mexico. Driving around New Mexico, one, the market there is fascinating, and then
Hmm.
two, just New Mexico is fascinating. I'm
Yep.
like driving through mountains. We're then in the desert. I'm like, I love it here. So
Yeah.
dry.
That's the life out west. That's just great expanses of desolation with then just random like suburbias plopped in.
I I had never I didn't know what to expect, but it wasn't what I expected.
What did you think about the New Mexico market?
The variety of stores and how those stores are performing is wild to
Yeah.
me. Like local regulation and the impact that they have had, one thing, pricing compression, super fascinating, and the impact of like how quickly it's basically hit in that market. And I know we're supposed to talk about pricing elasticity, but actually, one thing that I've been thinking about that I feel like you will have been thinking about as well is pricing compression, not just within one category, but where you see cannibalization of a category because of the introduction and growth of another category. So, what happens at 2/8 sales when we have pre rolls that are competitive in a price per gram perspective, and when customers then transition, and then they're not buying an entire eighth, they're buying like a portion of the eighth in pre rolls, and what that looks like within the data and thinking about pricing compression, not just as a price per gram is down. No, actually, price per gram is down and transitioned into smaller pack sizes, basically.
Well, actually, to that, a number that I like to think about and look at when it comes to markets is the big billboard or the big sign outside the shop advertising the price for the ounce. What is that
Yeah,
ounce priced at, right? Because you are
right.
correct in that, like, how, and there's a lot of reasons how we could get into
Yeah.
them, but like the reality is, how can you have like price stability when someone's saying here's an ounce for $49 and then someone else is saying here's an eighth for $60? Right. Like
Yeah.
it's just like I don't know. Like at that point, is the quality like, are we really saying like it's like quintupled? Like, does it really like justify like 4 or 5x the price on that
Mhm.
lower thing? No, like I feel like it must. I feel like there must be cannibalization within a category, within a price point, if you do have those kinds of like budget options.
Yeah.
They must exist. Do you know how much like in New Mexico they're saying that they're selling ounces for right now?
I mean, there was ads for everything basically from like 40 to 80.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Cheap.
Yeah, I mean, it pricing and that kind of thing isn't that much different than what we've seen maybe in Missouri and Michigan. Pretty close. Lots of crazy promos going on, not
Yeah.
unlike kind of like those other competitive markets. But to your kind of point around the ounce pricing, and then when you see the positioning, it's like the customer base, it's almost like the compression happens faster than the customer catches on to features and benefits,
Yes.
right?
Significantly
Because
faster.
the product that you're selling at $40 an ounce is never going to even come close. Well, maybe depending on, I guess, the brand and how it's packaged, come close to the $60 eighth. But like, does the customer distinguish between those two things? And fundamentally, I would be like, those are two different customers.
Oh
Like
yeah.
there is the value for volume customer, the customer who's just like chasing weight, and then there is like features, attributes. We call them like a Reddit customer, somebody who's like very specific about strain and or other features and benefits that the average consumer doesn't know, but they represent such a small percentage of the customer base that they are impactful from a revenue perspective, but not as impactful from a number of transactions perspective.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think like one thing that can cause some noise there is also then the consistency and the reliability of features and benefits for those high price things in a situation where you have it takes 9 months to make more of it.
Yeah.
Right. Uh,
And I
particularly
feel
on the
like,
flower side.
yeah, outdoor flower is a really interesting caveat to this, which like impacts all of these markets. That when does it show up in store? How quickly does it sell out? How has that then pushed other products to be stored? And then do we train the customer if the customer is not aware that it is outdoor? Like there is, and
Features and
I'm the first
benefits.
person to be like, outdoor doesn't necessarily make it less quality. Like, let me just like caveat that.
Yeah,
I don't want to
exactly.
be that person that's sitting here, but like the way that it gets positioned within packaging, or and it might be the features and benefits of the actual packaging, or it could be the features and benefits of the size of the package, and then how it is positioned within promos directly impacts how the customer will recover from that price once that product hits the market.
Well, can I ask you then, realistically, because of what you just said in terms of like what percent of the market that those customers make up, and then also kind of going to like a lot of these decisions on offering that low priced ounce or offering the stable high top shelf menu come down to retailers trying to pull a lever to maximize revenue and or gross margins within a very short period of time, saying something's not working, I need to make a decision, I need to pull a lever. What lever do I pull? In your experience, like how are they parsing the fact that you do have two customer sets, you do have like different price points and different qualities that they're like probably looking for, but at the end of the day, which is the, like what is the levers that the retailer is just pulling because it's easy and simpler to do?
I think, way to ask a loaded question. No, I think if you were to take one step backwards, I would be like, what's the indication in the data that tells them that they need to pull that lever? Because if you're looking at like gross margin as a percentage, it's not very helpful, actually. Like we should be looking at gross margin dollars,
Mm-hmm.
because in the instance that we sell a bunch of low price product, even at a high margin, we still might not make as much in gross profit dollars by the sale as if we sold less units of a more expensive product. Now, there is a line to which like the curve exists, to which it is beneficial one way or the other, and it's like it's not perfect on either side. That's kind of first. Second would be like, what's the indication that we have these customers purchasing? And you would need to be running a basket analysis to understand how product is getting purchased together, and then overlay that with recency and frequency to be able to fully tell that story. And I don't know if that is super easy to do
No, it's not.
in a lot of POS. So I'm not sure that it is happening, maybe.
It's yeah. I
And
would say
that's no fault of anybody's, really, but it's because of the accessibility of the information.
yeah, I would say what is appears to be the most accessible information when it comes to do these customers exist. It appears to be the like competitive signaling of secret menu shopping, of seeing the billboard, of seeing the promotion, of knowing the store down the street is offering this and thinking in like a FOMO of I need to be offering that as well,
Yeah.
with this belief that there are customers outside of my store that are not coming into my store due to something that I am not offering that other people are offering, which I think is what then leads to that like bloating of both having the $50 ounce and the $60 eighth, and then to your point, then keystoning everything and saying, well, if I sell everything at a 50% margin, then I'm good on the margin side,
Yeah.
right? Either way. And then you're right. Then like from there, you're starting to, it's just so much noise that then it becomes incredibly difficult to parse out. Do you actually have customers who love buying high priced eighths consistently that you can get great margin contribution from, and you've accidentally just like gutted that segment by pushing bulk, right? Or something
Yeah,
like that.
we use the example of socks as an analogy for like how an inventory grows. And the example is like if I want to sell you one pair of white athletic socks, I'm going to need two sizes in store. I need a small, medium, and a large, extra large. And then let's say that like you're actually a little picky about the rise of the sock. And so maybe we have like a super tall sock and then we have like a shorter sock. So now I need 4 pairs of socks to be able to sell you one sock. And this is like essentially how inventory bloats, is like the the retailer then is looking at the inventory and looking at what other potential retailers are offering as an assortment of options and being like, how many options do I need in front of my customer to be able to translate into a sale? And then you make this more complicated to be like, how often do you buy these socks? Because if I only capture you one time, is acquiring you worth the price of the, $40 ounce? Whereas if you buy a $40 ounce every other week for the rest of the year, maybe it is. And so being able to understand kind of like the way that the customer purchases isn't only about how much they spend in one time, or isn't only about how many times they visit the store. It's also a combination of where you can reduce the amount of inventory to carry to be able to support that one purchase.
And one thing you had mentioned there briefly a second ago was basket analysis, right? Getting at that through basket analysis or understanding. Can you elaborate there more? Like, what do you like? What part of looking within those baskets of those individuals would you say are signals that identify you're doing something right or doing something wrong?
Basket analysis is like, there's a number of different ways that you could run it. I'm curious to be like, where do you first go? I think the first step that I think about is that average per customer sucks. Like that is the worst KPI because it isn't directional. It is a temperature check, but it doesn't tell you very much. It doesn't tell you about the composition of what goes into that number. So the example of that is like, let's say that a store has an average basket size of $65, but when you pull all their transactions over a period of time, they've got, a huge number that are sitting between $10 and $30, and then a huge number, or not a huge number, but a huge amount of dollars being generated from maybe $150 or more baskets, which are overrepresented. And these ones are underrepresented if you only look at it by dollars, or if you only look at it by the frequency of occurrence, or like the number of transactions that fit within those bands. The average, depending on where you're getting this average from, even if it's a weighted average, is it weighted to the occurrence or is it weighted to the dollars, is going to give you false sense. And what we have basically found kind of reoccurringly is that oftentimes the average per customer, when you look at that as a KPI, and then you actually look at the transactions, no one is purchasing that way. No one is spending $50 and on average per transaction. They're spending 10 to 30 with high frequency, or they're spending like 150 or more. And obviously these numbers are very dependent on a per market basis, but that's like first basket analysis should be like, whoa, how are customers actually purchasing?
Yeah. I would say that that's like, you're really hitting the nail on the head there when it comes to something in terms of like false signaling, right? Or like, so talking about average ticket size, I've always taken to it's not as helpful as it seems, to your point. Also, due to the fact that like it's relatively stable if you look at it at the big average size for a given store, relatively stable at like a month. Like, what's my average ticket size this month? What's my average ticket size next month? Comparing those two numbers in general will not tell you anything about why you didn't make as much money in month 1 versus month 2. right? When I've
Mhm.
looked at it, when I've seen it, it's a lot more to what you're saying in terms of like frequency of shopping, and mixing that frequency with that what they're actually buying, and like stabilizing those factors, right? And there's like that the instability of people coming back, or the seasonality, or whatever it is that's causing customers to come shop 3 times, drop off into oblivion, come back, whatever it is, that when they're actually making those purchases, that they're making them on products that doesn't cause their entire basket to all of a sudden make you half as many gross margin dollars as it did last time because of some menu change you made. Like that, it's like almost like stabilizing the customer base with all these factors in consideration is what ultimately gives people that predictability and that reliability to make the tweaks on top of that. And so I totally agree. It's just saying, hey, make your average ticket size higher is like, okay, like what? Like, what is that? What are you actually saying? Like, what do you mean by saying that? Right.
Yeah. Yeah, like even before, I guess, even before we dig into how the transactions are playing out, there is a part even where oftentimes we walk into a store and a manager was like, we can increase our sales if we increase our average per customer $2 or $5. And
Hmm.
I'm like, that's cool. How are we going to do that? And they're like, we're going to add another unit per transaction.
Yeah. Little
And I'm
pre-rolls.
like, highly unlikely. Like, unless you are doing something revolutionary in the way that you're going to retrain the team, that is one of the most difficult barriers to get up over. Instead, it's like, well, what if you just reduced the amount of units available in store at a certain price point? Or what if like the core number of products that you're moving, you lifted them $1? Like, what's that going to do? So understanding the data that like feeds into it. And so when I think about basket analysis, I think about it like understanding how the average, what the contributing baskets look like that go into the average. And then within that to say, how do we see variation? So within that $10 to $30 price range, we see usually 2 to 3 units per transaction. Okay, great. That is giving us some kind of indication of maybe average price within those. 150 or more, we're seeing a very different number of units within those baskets. Okay, great. Then it is like on top of that, then understanding what types of products are getting purchased most frequently together. Like, is it clusters of pre-rolls? Is it an eighth
Mm.
in a pre-roll? Is it like 10 vapes all at once? Like, what is the mix of product and how is it getting purchased? Because that would then start to give you an indication of like, if you want to increase the average per customer, where you might be able to squeeze a little bit or where you might be able to push a little bit without it being super disruptive and without having to go in and try and train your bud tending team to sell an extra unit per transaction and then ultimately then get defeated because they feel like they're making icky recommendations.
Yeah. No, 100%. Um, it's interesting when you're talking about like what those clusters are. I think also to the point on leveraging of the data, people, in my experience, they assume certain clusters or certain ways people purchase exist that drive a lot of stuff, that just looking at that data, and I'll admit, to your point, part of this is like it's hard to like consistently look at it and consistently gain a story out of it that you can consistently take actions on, but they're just not as prevalent as people think, right? Like, brand loyalty is one of those ones. Everyone talks about our people brand loyalty. In my experience, looking at it over the course of 2 years of a customer's life cycle, like they are not brand loyal, right? My experience looking at it, in terms of even category specific things, they move across categories, but at the same time, like, maybe it's a brand they've only bought like, 20% or 15% of their transactions have a brand. But if you talk about that brand to that customer, for some reason, those customers act as if that brand is God's gift to earth. And they'll like immediately buy, huge amounts of more stuff, or they'll come into the store because you told them about some promotion associated with this brand, which would make you assume, oh, that person's brand loyal to that brand. But the reality is in the data, like when then they come into the store, they're buying like 2 other things at the same time or something like that. And it is it is complicated and it changes. And I realize why retailers then have the fallback onto the heuristics because of that, of assuming, well, these kinds of consumers must exist in the data because I can understand those kinds of consumers, right? When they don't
Yeah,
always.
what you're talking about is like trying to also wrap our heads around what influences are within these environments that are causing our customer to purchase this way.
Exactly,
Like
right.
if they are priced, to your point around ounces and the price out the front, are we seeing a reduction in overall prices because we've just anchored to that price from a number psychology as the customer's walking into the store? So like
Yes.
the moment that you advertise $40 out in front of the store, how does that impact all sales, not just on ounces? But like, did you have a bunch of vapes that you used to sell at more than $40 and now you can't get past $40 because we told the customer coming into the store $40 is how much they can spend here?
Yes, exactly.
And, or like, are you selling a certain number of pre-rolls together based off of the way that they're merchandised at cash?
Mm-hmm.
Like there are all of these, there's not just what it looks like in the data. I think you and I are probably like super consumed with what goes on in the data. But then like you walk into an environment and look for what are the indicators of the environment that are telling us and does it show up in the data? And that's the stuff that's like really hard. So I hate to be like, I don't think that customers, we're giving our customers almost too much credit. Like that's not really the right way of saying it, but we are not taking into account what influence we have either intentionally or unintentionally that led the customer to purchase that way.
Particularly when so many of the purchases, particularly in like talking about the states we're talking about, right? Where at the end of the day, you have to talk to a bud tender with an iPad to get the order in the first place. You can't even touch the product yourself, right? And so to your point, right, is it that wow, consumers are incredibly price elastic to pre-rolls, and when we're giving everybody 50% off pre-rolls or penny pre-rolls, we're just like they're flying out the door and that consumers love that? Or is it that every single bud tender at the end of that transaction says, "Hey, I'll also throw in a 50% like 50% off pre-roll," and it's like $1, right, or something like that. And so the customer goes, "Oh, okay, right," because they were offered it, anchored it, and so in the data it looks like wow, people love 50% off pre-rolls, but the reality is that it's just getting added to the bill right at the end of the day because it's just such a low barrier for consumers and it's being brought up in every
Yeah.
transaction.
And the numbers that show up in the data are only what was available in store.
Exactly.
So like if you were seeing, say, for example, you did run a 50% off pre-roll and you saw a bunch of uptick, is it also, how is it relevant if you look at the same data set without the promo? What does that tell you? So like you saw a 50% increase in your pre-rolls because you had them 50% off. Is it because we got the price down to what the customer was really comfortable spending? Or is it that we highlighted it to the customer and therefore they're like excited about it and the bud tenders are excited about it? And is it a full 50% lift over where they were spending before?
Yeah.
I don't know if there's always enough measurement of like, well, what did it look like before?
There isn't. I mean, particularly when you understand the supply side constraints of a lot of this, when it comes to the only reason you even have that brand or that thing on your menu in the first place is because the wholesaler said, put it on the menu, run a promotion, I'll cover half the promotion. And you were like, brand launch, 50% off this pre-roll. But there is no before because
Right.
because like the only reason why you put it on the menu in the first place is because it was promo driven by the wholesaler, supply side driven, and then you sell out of all of them, and so then you can't take away the promo and see what happens because there's none left, you're out of stock, right? And there's like
Yeah.
really no way to your point, like there's no way to discern these. I mean, it's a massive correlation causation problem, right? Where on some level, are we solving for a lot of signals that we're seeing? when the reality is like we're like observation bias, or like we're shaping our own destiny. Like we're creating these signals in the data by the pure decisions that we're making, because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that is being offered to the consumer.
Yeah. We had our socks at 50% off. We sold 50% of the socks, if not more. And then when we return the socks to full price, we only have one style of the sock left.
Yeah.
Like, does that really tell you what the demand is and what price the customer is willing to pay for the socks? No.
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 Not particularly also when we understand with 300 to 500 SKUs per store, there is no way that that consumer looked and read all of the socks on the thing and said, oh, that's the one I want, and I would get it if it was that thing. It's like, no, because it was on sale, law of like, we can't think more than 5 options or something like that, right? One of the five options that consumer even thought of were the ones on sale, because like those are the ones that were talked about. Those are the ones that like we've been being, to your point, the sign at the front of the store, the billboard on the highway, the sign on every other, and it's like this. I don't know. It is. I think we shape in an evolving industry. We shape the demands of consumers so much through the choices that we're making within stores, within menus, within markets. And you're assuming then what we're getting back is this signal of demand.
Yeah.
When at the end of the day, perhaps it's just that people want to smoke weed. And there's like a
And
certain...
don't understand the product enough to understand what
yeah, don't understand the product, don't know what price to expect, don't understand like different modalities. You're right, never bought an ounce in their life, and then wait, you offer ounces? Wait, they're $40? Oh, okay. I guess I'll buy this. Yeah. So anyway, not to end it on there's nothing we can do, but I guess
No, but
yeah.
There
go
is
ahead.
something to do. Like,
yeah.
I think what we just identified is like, do you give yourself A/B comparisons in the data? Like, what information are you using to validate the assumption of demand, basically?
Yes.
Yeah. And investigate whether your theory is on point or whether maybe it's telling you something different. I think that's the action point, is like, just because the neighbor did it doesn't mean that it is successful. And you have no idea what decisions went into them creating that offer. Like, what that offer is a reflection of the strategy they made 30 days ago. Who knows what was going on in their business 30 days ago? Or if there was a strategy that was going on in the business. And so I often come back to being like, I wish we would spend as much time looking inside as we do outside.
Oh yeah. Oh hell yeah. But it's like a FOMO thing, right? Yeah. It's a huge it's a FOMO thing. But I totally agree. I mean, I would be super interested. I don't know if anyone's done this, but I'd be super interested to that point of like hey, take half your bud tenders, tell half of them that the pre-roll's 50% off. Don't tell the other half at all about it, and see if the only reason why you sold those pre-rolls is because of the half that mentioned it, because that's what they told to mention, or something like that. I don't know. That's like a crazy type of thing, but like it's little things like that. And don't let the FOMO of, well, if I don't tell everybody, then like I'll miss out on something, like drive you. Like, understand the fact is if that other half produced just as so much margin contribution as the half you did tell, then like, did the promo matter? I don't know.
No, you did a lot of work for the same amount of squeeze.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe, I guess, there would be somebody where they would be like, well, that promo helped you acquire a new customer. But I'm like, if that only is a new customer if they keep shopping with you.
Exactly.
Otherwise, it's a transaction.
Exactly. Which is a different question. And that's like a different motivation. It's a different thing. And it's a different set of goals, right? At that point, okay, if your goal is customer acquisition, are we talking CAC? Are we talking funnels? Are we talking like, you know what I mean? Like, you're thinking, oh, well, I gave pre-rolls 50% off. That's how I acquired new customers. And it's like, okay, well, like where was the rest of the funnel around customer acquisition? Right. Yeah. Before you're even at that point, are you letting people know you exist? Right. Is your Are you on the internet? Or you have SEO? Like all these other things before you're going into like trying to move that lever to have that kind of signal, because you're just creating your own perpetual, what we're saying, right? You're just creating your own perpetual uh self-serving beliefs, I suppose, not to get too nuanced on it, but without that A/B testing, without that rigor.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the call out is like, what happens if we just experiment a little bit more? Like, to your point, we have enough SKUs in store to experiment with.
Yeah.
You know, this isn't like we are only carrying one version of a product and it's difficult to kind of go back and forth. We have enough products, we have enough brands in store. We can run experimentation and see within a confined definition of like what happens when we change the different features, benefits, attributes of either the product, of the promotion, of the price, of the way that it's merchandised, of the way that the team sells it. Like, there are so many things that you could adjust to see what the result is.
Yeah. And like understanding that those adjustments can be very simple and can be very actionable, are very like doable, right? And those adjustments, the great thing about A/B tests is they're really easy to see in the data. Like it's super easy to see, hey, like, this day we did this, or these people told this people we didn't tell. Okay, just pull it, look at it, right? So you don't have to constantly be trying to think, well, what if, per se. But I think what people do run into with that though is the SOPs, is like it's so difficult to enforce SOPs on even like how to punch in the customer appropriately into the system, let alone starting to implement SOPs of experimentation, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do you start to get to that?
How do you scale retail is what your question is.
Yeah, man.
Save for another day. No, like, yeah, you're totally right. And also, how easy is it within these systems? Are they all connected? Are they helping the team? Are we creating distractions for the team? Yeah, it is not. We were saying this like, oh, so easy to do. No, it's 100% not easy to do. But the time allocated looking at competition, reallocated to even running one or two experiments, I think for me, that's the call.
I like that. That's a really simple talk about heuristics, to think is check yourself of, hey, you're right. Like if you're finding yourself scrolling through the weed maps menu of the person down the street, or the Jane menu of the person down the street, and think to yourself, how many hours have I now spent doing that? And can you allocate half of those hours or like another of it to saying, okay, run an experiment, right? That's a very simple like thought thing to help people like start to incorporate that into their practices. And I think it has to start there. It has to start with little things, or little things you can do. Yeah.
Even if it's not even an experiment, even if you start lower barrier to entry, that is like, do you understand what your average per basket means? It's like, do you really understand what data points are going into the KPIs that you're looking for? That alone would get you a really long way if you just said, if I usually spend 5 hours a week looking at my competition, I'm going to spend 2.5. I'm going to spend 2.5 better understanding my own transactions.
So kind of taking it a step back for a second there, and this kind of goes back to something we talked about earlier, but I've been thinking about it now in terms of what we're saying. So what we're saying that is that if a lot of what's happening here is a kind of a little bit of like, yeah, competitor snooping, acting off of metrics that you don't fully understand per se, going off of average basket size. Like, how can we bring it up? Oh, I don't know. Add this to the menu because the person down the street has it, or the wholesaler says, well, the reason why is because you don't have these products that I have on your menu. And then on the macro side, we see New Mexico, right? Michigan, everywhere. Price compression, price compression, price compression. It kind of lends to the question of, is the price compression real? Not in terms of, yes, it's real. Like literally it's real.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like, are the consumers actually demanding compressed price, and is that yielding then like the elasticity, right? Like the what one would expect in a perfect competitive market of like, okay, that yields proportional demand on the flip side, or is it some weird coordination failure, some like weird operational coordination failure where like 300 people have kind of accidentally all dropped the price well below where the consumers actually want it to be?
Are you asking me what came first, chicken or the egg? Because like, uh, I think it's all. I think it's like all of the above. It isn't, and then there are groups or retailers who will also be like, I'm going to take this strategy and see what I can do with it and see what it does to compress my neighbor. Because I can choose to compress, but maybe my neighbor can't. And what's the byproduct of that? So it's all like,
Yeah.
price compression is real. Don't get me wrong. Price compression, like once you get a certain amount of inventory within a market and inventory, whether that be at
Must
wholesale
exist.
or
Yeah.
at retail, you're going to get some level of pricing compression. But there is also part of pricing compression is choosing to compete off of price. And this potentially false, maybe not false, who knows, macroeconomic environment that our customers are in, where like life is expensive.
Yeah.
Like, do customers actually not want to buy eighths as much this year and buy more pre-rolls? Or is it because like that's what they can afford?
Yeah.
Or is it that's what the availability has told them that they're where they have the best choices? I don't know.
Well, the irony of that, right, is that management practice, that style, that thinking, that thing, talking about in Michigan example, even, average price of CPI for groceries up since 2021, what, like 20%, 30%, something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Would you say the average price of an ounce in Michigan is up 30% since 2021?
Oh no. In that
It's like the one thing. And if you think about it, if you think of price compression in real dollars, then even like you should have, if it was with the rest of the market, if it was an inflationary good, you should have expected it to be 30% more.
Or did the product enter the market at the wrong price at the beginning?
Exactly. I would agree with that.
Like, okay, let's say that the average customer spends $300 or $400 a month in groceries. Is that fair to assume that we're going to have customers spend $300 or $400 a month in cannabis? For the average? Absolutely not. What percentage of their everyday consumption in dollars is being allocated basically to cannabis?
Cannabis.
And did you just see, is pricing compression literally being caused by the increase in grocery prices?
Yeah.
Like, are you just seeing the customer say, I have $100, my groceries used to cost 40 and I used to spend 60 on weed. And now my groceries cost 60, I have $40 to spend on weed. Like, we gotta eat.
Yeah. And I would totally agree with that, particularly understanding that what was that original price that they entered the market with, that everyone thought that they could make money off of in 2019, 2021, whatever it was, right? And where is that now? Like that original price was basically made up, right? It was arbitrary, right? It was whatever the fixed price was from like non-regulated or whatever, like people perceived, dime bags being $10, right? That's the greatest price fixed thing in the world, right? $10 eighth through a dime bag, or $10 gram, sorry, for a dime bag. Like that was what it once was, right? And now
Yeah.
we are experiencing the market existing. And to your point on, was the original price meaningful? Did that mean anything? I would agree. There's no reason to think it did.
Okay, wait. So then within the data, when do you make a decision that you measure from price? Because I think what you just said is that if the price entered the market meaningless, and we measure price and compression from that number, all of it is a false narrative, basically.
Yes.
So do we, in a market like California, Colorado, Michigan, Missouri, New Mexico, do we look at the price today?
Yes.
Do we use today's price
Yeah.
as the place where we start to understand price?
Yeah, I would say like let's be real, saying it takes 5 years for a retail market based on an agricultural product to mature is kind of crazy if you think about it, right? That means there's only been like, what, 7 grow cycles or something like that. Obviously they stagger them now, but like that's not that many. Like 5 years is not a long time. Like corn has been sold for a very long time compared to thinking. But I would totally agree. I would say 100% the price today is significantly more reflective of reality than the price was on day one. Significantly more, because you have, it goes back to what's driving prices: the availability of wholesale, consumer perception, all these coordination failures. You didn't ever need to try to meet your competitor down the street who was trying to undercut your price before, because that store didn't physically exist because it took them 2 years to build it. Right. But now that store exists, right? And that store existing means that there will always be a store on that corner. Maybe it'll move a couple blocks down. But to your point, right? Even 2 years in, you were the only store in the town. That's a very different equation than if there's 2 stores in the town, 3 stores in the town. If Texas, talking to Mexico, if Texas, you couldn't buy weed in Texas, but you can, like, you know what I mean? Like the price, I would agree. Like it's so much more of like, this is reality and this is what we need to work off of. And I'm not even positive this is reality yet. I think we have another easily 5 more years of chaos to deal with.
I think I agree with you. I think that this is not reality because we have a false sense of demand per state because of people crossing state lines.
Yeah.
We'll leave that like maybe where that is. But yeah, I think that there is something to be said. It's like, where are we spending our time understanding what things have happened in the past in other markets? Grocery compression of prices, non-compression of prices, price fixing. Fascinating place to like look at as a understanding to try and wrap your head around the macro and microeconomic climate that is impacting cannabis prices today.
100%. Cool. Well, at that, I think we reached our time.
Till we meet again.
Till we meet again. Thank you, Krysta.
Oh, thank you.